Early PlayStation titles, those released before the mainstream juggernauts like Tomb Raider, Crash Bandicoot, Resident Evil, or Final Fantasy, are always really interesting, to me at least. That's why today, I want to take a look at a game called Floating Runner, also known as Floating Runner Quest for the Seven Crystals. It was a 3D platformer developed by T&E Soft, though their name appears in some unused text with a copyright date of 1995, and also the game seems to have been published by Jing Interactive. Yeah, I don't know either. It was one of the few 3D platformers that released before Crash Bandicoot and Mario 64 did. Because of that, this game lacks many of the conventions that would otherwise become standard after those two games. Anyways, before I go over what makes this game so interesting, I'd like to run through the game. It's super short, so let's just get over it. In this game, you get to choose your gender. This has zero impact on the game. You start in this little starter level and you can run around. You have tank controls with the D-pad, and I set my controls personally, yes you can customize them, to run with L1, side hop with L2 and R2, jump with cross, shoot with square, and item management is left up to circle and triangle. Anyways, so you run around and these little cute critters can be shot at or stomped, and when you do that, they drop money, these little gem things. There are also these chests which can give you a health restore or sometimes other items. Oh, and also dying gives you no punishment except resetting the score and leaving you with 0 cash. At the end of the level, there's this little gem thing which is now changing colors, and when we access it, well, we get to the coolest part of Floating Runner. The level order is up to you. The first level, this one, and the last one are the same, though every other one can be chosen in which order you prefer to play them. You have to still go through all of them, but depending on what color the crystal is when you access it, that's going to be the color of the world that you're going to be sent to. So, I picked the blue gem, so now I'm in some kind of sky world. It's full of enemies and other random stuff, mostly consisting of big platforms and sky waterfalls that reach those big platforms. Once we get the crystal, we get sent to the next level, which is a lot more constructed. Tight platforms, blind jumps, and that sort of annoying stuff do kind of bring it down. Once we get the second crystal, we can finally go to the teal world, which is some kind of cyberspace thing. Pretty damn constructed. There are these borders, and there's some trick to getting around them. You can kind of get a hang of it sometimes. I don't know, the camera angle makes it kinda hard. I also found this wand that freezes enemies and uses those things we collect as ammo, though I really didn't find any use to it. The second level is a lot harder with a lot more jumps and tight platforms. And there are also these little bounce platforms that go up and down, and when you hop on them, you automatically hop off, making them really annoying to jump on. The lava world is full of lava. The first level has some tight-ass platforms and a lot of enemy spam, and the second one forces us to jump off of enemies to reach some platforms while we climb up the mouth of a volcano, which is, in my opinion, really nice scenery. The sand world is interesting. The first level starts kind of open, but then transitions to these vertical blocks that you climb up. Then after some more slightly open areas, you get the gem. The second level is kind of this temple thing, actually, and it features the only proper puzzle I found in this game. Just go a little bit backwards, stand on these two platforms, and boom, some spikes appear, and you can jump off of them. This is where I found the fire staff, and it's actually pretty useful. The forest world is pretty basic. Enemy spam, the levels are kind of open, you end up climbing a giant tree for the crystal. The second level is more bricky, I guess, I don't know. There are some slides with an invisible platform, and you also climb a tree here. The poison world is interesting. You run over these weird leaves, then you're on top of a tree canopy, and then you get the crystal. The second level is more interesting, actually way more interesting, because you're forced to run around this central thing surrounded by poison waterfalls or a force field or something, I don't know. You're basically just forced to go around it and find a path that would lead you to where the crystal is. It's linear, but it's pretty fun. The penultimate level, however, is not. It is just enemy spam on platforms, cool theming, but still annoying. Once you obtain the final crystal, then the final level appears. So there's this big dude you're supposed to kill, he's the final boss, but it's way too annoying to actually hit him, so you basically have to be right up in his face, so I just kind of used cheats to kill him. Sorry, I'm impatient, and it was either that or not finishing the game. Also, a continue here sends you back to the enemy spam level, so that's nice. Anyways, he takes way too long to kill, but once you do it, you just get the credits where they show off the enemies and the end credit scene where they ask you to input your name and then it's back to the start. Quite a simple game, right? So, what is so special about it? Well, a lot of things. First of all, it's not a bad game. It's not a good game either, the controls and enemies are the two most aggravating factors, but hey, it's not that punishing minus the final boss, and I'll be honest, it is partially about aesthetics. The first level does have textures, sure, but the other levels are mostly a textureless, very early 3D aesthetic sort of thing, where it looks honestly really cute a lot of the time. The music itself is also lovely, but I think the flat-shaded simple visuals and cutesy characters really do well to set this game apart from the other 3D platformers, except honestly maybe Jumping Flash. I get that Bubsy 3D had a similar flat polygon aesthetic, but let's be real here, that aesthetic was way more spacey while this one is way more dreamlike, if you get what I'm saying. Of course, the aesthetic is kind of basic in a lot of places, a limitation of this game's design, but it still looks so damn cute. I think you could definitely do a lot more with this. The camera sucks, of course, you've probably noticed, but remember, this game does run at 60 FPS with basically 0 drops below that. This is also why the game uses so few textures, as textured polygons take twice as long to draw and distort way more. There's actually an alternate camera mode that helps with depth perception somewhat, which is nice. Of course, the camera angle is so low to minimize pop-in, though I think the game would have been much better with pop-in and a good camera than with no pop-in and a bad camera. The timer is also a frustrating mechanic. I mean, in a 3D game where I could explore, why would you limit how much time I have to explore the levels? Keep in mind, nobody ever wants to make a bad game, they just often run out of time, money, or both. That's the fate Bubsy 3D was stuck with. Now, something else you might have noticed is the release date. In Japan, this game came out in January of 1996, but in the US, it came out after Mario 64 did. By the time Floating Runner came out, its only competitors were actually Bug and Jumping Flash, and both of those games had an exclamation mark in the name for some reason. Anyways, when you put the game up against the 2D-ish Bug and the first-person Robert, Floating Runner was an interesting, arcadey, fast-paced 3D platformer, while maybe not that good, was an honest first attempt at something like this. And as a frontrunner from a small studio, of course it wasn't gonna be perfect. Or good, honestly. Jumping Flash was created by a company with previous experience in the genre. Crash had some incredible developers also with previous 3D experience, while Mario 64 had Nintendo behind it. What did Floating Runner have? Well, not much it seems. I mean, Bug was fine, Jumping Flash was fun, but Floating Runner was just so interesting. The game definitely had potential, so I'd quickly like to go over some of the changes that I would make in order to make the game more good. Let's start with just patching up what's already there. First of all, I would make the enemies slower and less nut-twistingly, ass-blastingly hard. For a 3D platformer, the focus should be a little bit more on platforming and a little bit less on enemy spam. Make health easy to replenish because there's just way too little ways to replenish your health. Maybe make those things that the enemies drop slowly restore some health too. Then remove the timer. It only makes me want to explore the levels less. And then make the main characters floatier, so there's more mid-air control so jumping doesn't feel like a Hail Mary every time. And speaking of Hail Marys, maybe remove or modify the blind jumps so they're not there. With that, maybe you could also restart the player at the beginning of the level when they hit continue, because now the game would be a lot more forgiving in moment-to-moment action. Maybe that way it could be more fair. Then make the endgame boss less annoying. It doesn't have to be quote-unquote easier, just make it so I can actually hit it without having to run up to its face with these honestly kind of bad controls for this specific fight. So those would be the basic changes, and while there are some more advanced ideas I have, they would be way harder to implement and would require a complete overhaul of the entire game. So one of the questions I had was, what if you just made the render distance larger and then lowered the target frame rate to 30? Most games of the time would hope to run at 30 FPS, so I think it's fine if this game doesn't hit 60. This would let the world feel a lot more cohesive because you could actually see more of it. I've gone into the game with a FreeCam hack, and while it doesn't look completely terrible, you can see it does have a lot of pop-in, hence why I think a 30 FPS frame rate with a far larger view distance would be fine. You can try to play the game with this hack, but some levels don't have a real skybox, so you gotta have some issues sometimes. But then I had an idea. So it was in that Desert Temple level. What if you had an action RPG built similarly to this game, where you changed a few things around? Like, imagine if these levels were like dungeons that you would enter, and the game would maybe have a more traditional town section and like you search for stuff and bring it back. I think that idea would have a lot more value, and then you could have items and puzzles and other mechanics that see far more use. This game, like a lot of other early attempts at genres that would be done far better relatively soon after they came out, make me wonder about what could have been, but is that really accurate, even? Like, a lot of the ideas that we have about what could have been come from how other games of the time did it. Alone in the Dark could have been a more Resident Evil-like game and ditched a lot of the shitty adventure game nonsense, but it was an adventure game first, and not a survival horror game first like Resident Evil was. The designers just really never saw it that way. And the same goes for this game. Crushing Kai 1995, also known as Nintendo Space World 1995 and the rest of the world, showcased a Mario 64 prototype in November of 1995. 2 months is just not enough for the developers to change up the game from what Floating Runner was to a longer, more complicated game. Floating Runner itself is a high score based romp with little secrets to find on each run to make it more unique. With an ass-blasting difficulty that takes time to learn, Mario 64 is the first 3D collectathon platformer, and Jumping Flash is a linear 3D platformer with mostly open stages and also a score system, though it didn't matter that much. From all of these games, Floating Runner's game design is a lot more arcadey and archaic. It focuses on an arcadey high-score romp over a more long-term play session with a concrete beginning and end. Mario 64 sets up Bowser with an actual story and actual character monologue. I guess because Mario doesn't talk. And even if it's surface level, it still is an actual story. Jumping Flash has those endearingly 90s FMV cutscenes that also set up the plot and villain, but Floating Runner has nothing really except in the manual. It's a straightforward, hard arcade game, and I think that this is where it seriously suffers from the most, because it's on a home console and not in the arcades. So, at the end of the day, while the primary changes I mentioned would definitely be helpful, I can't help but wonder what direction you could take a game like this if you just had a different perspective back then. Maybe if you looked at the game from a more RPG perspective, you could have cooked up something less arcadey and with far more depth. And I'm only really saying it as an RPG perspective because what other view can you really have from a game like this and think, what other genres had more depth at the time? So again, imagine that, a 3D platformer with maybe some more RPG elements, a town you can return to, like a central castle to buy items from, where you'd pay with those gems that the enemies drop. Maybe you'd have to retrieve those special items from a dungeon or two while on the main quest of defeating the big bad. There's a lot you could do with this concept, and It all requires more development time and therefore money, cause you know, people need to get paid. And after all of that, you'd have a pretty decent game that could actually sell more units, therefore making more money back than what was spent on the game. Maybe this would have been the first great 3D platformer alongside Jumping Flash. I don't know. Look, at the end of the day, a delayed game does have a chance to be a good game, but a rushed game has a far lower chance. This is something that's been proven time and time again. But sometimes, you just don't have the budget not to rush something. Sometimes, it's either rushing it and delivering it in whatever state it comes out, or just never delivering it. That's sadly how it is for most of the industry. So, that's Floating Runner. It's not a bad game, but it could have been so much more. Jing didn't do anything much, really, except this game and some other Japanese ones you've never heard of, while T&E Soft would make golf games, and before this also made Virtual Highlight and also Red Alarm on the Virtual Boy. Yeah, I don't know. D4 Enterprises seems to own the rights for this game now, though I'm not sure if they even know they do, and they'd probably sell it to you for like a hamburger or something at this point. I don't think this game is that valuable. Actually, I just went on eBay, and some of the PAL copies are being sold for like 100, 150 bucks. The US ones are for 120, and the Japanese ones are for like 24, 30. So, take that as you will. I don't actually know how to end this. D4 Enterprises, maybe do so. I don't know. Bye-bye.